some notes of appreciation for all the folks that have helped make this evening possible. And it's impossible. I simply can't thank everyone who is involved. And one of the things I'd like to do, though, is ask that if you were involved in helping set up for this evening, or if you were involved in our auction, either through donations or helping coordinate it, or if you were just involved in any way with making this evening possible, I'd ask that you would stand for a second so we could just show our appreciation, because I know it is a very large team of volunteers. And I want to mention, with our auction, as you know, it wrapped up last night. We had gone into our auction hoping to match what we had earned last year, which was about $16,000 through the donations for the auction. Excited to announce that I believe the closing total was $21,963. So that was fantastic. Also, I want to take a moment to thank three special ladies who've done so much to make tonight possible: Michelle Bandy and Kathy Cole and Jamie Hartley. They began work on this event when we finished packing up the gym last year. They have worked on it throughout the year, and again, it's wonderful. A lot of time goes into this. I know some people thought I had done all of this, but no, it was coordinated by those three wonderful women, and again, that they've done all of that work. And then as you look at this set and this backdrop, this was put together by B.J. Brown and our operations team. They built this from scratch, one tree, I think, for all of it. So it's incredible. So just appreciation for that. Now, at this time, I get the opportunity to introduce someone whose name is synonymous with our school. He has been a parent here and has had 4 children come through the school. He's been a board member, a board chair. He was involved in this school and really this building before this building existed. He has a story and a unique perspective about this school, this place, and I look forward for you guys being able to hear Bob Dascombe's story. Bob and Dale are part of the reason that this school is the incredible place it is. They have played an integral role into getting us here today. Wonderful people, and if you don't know Bob individually, you might know him better as the voice, and he is the voice of the Eagles. So Bob, if you'd please come, it's my honor to introduce you tonight.
I feel like home here in this arena. Do you think anybody really buys arena when I announce it? Anyway, good evening. It's great to be here, Eric. Thank you for those kind words. And my wife and I prayed tonight as we came over. My goal, my sincere goal, is to encourage but to glorify God tonight. So please don't misconstrue anything. That is our prayer. But I do want to share some interesting stories. And I wanted to move it along because you didn't come here for Bob. You came here for the main event. I'm kind of like the warm-up act. After a song, you're ready for them to move on. That's me tonight. Anyway, our family's first encounter at Grace Christian School, it's hard to believe it was 25 years ago. And I'll never forget it. Our oldest son, Addison, was a candidate for kindergarten. And we had heard about Grace Christian School at Mount Olivet. And my wife had said, honey, there are limited number of spots. Would you please get up early and go over there and wait in line and get one of those coveted spots? I said, no problem. I'm a morning person. 7 a.m. ought to do it. She goes, no, dear. It won't work. 7 a.m. This is a very hard spot to get. So I was there that morning at 4:30 in the morning. You would have thought I would have been first in line. But no, some crazy mother beat me there by 10 minutes. In any event, we've been part of this community ever since, and it's been a real blessing. And like many of you, we have served in a variety of ways. We're just like you. we find a place to serve, and I look around the room and I see all these faces. Some I know, some I don't know, but we all find a way to serve. I want you to know, though, if you look at me, I am the exhibit to show you that God can use just about anybody to accomplish his work. 20 years ago, enrollment at Grace, we had about 250 students, and we felt we were pretty large. In fact, we had to expand. We added modular classrooms. Have you ever heard of those? We added modular classrooms, and I want you to know the date is vivid in my mind because on September 6, 1996, another event literally blew through town. Do you remember that day? Hurricane Fran. I remember that day because on that date, our family business sustained close to $500,000 in damage to roofs and buildings. We had just finished getting the CO on those modulars, and I was so busy dealing with family business that I was almost scared to show up and see what those modulars looked like. So I drove up to the school after a couple days of work, and I was just so relieved to know those modulars were still in place. God protected our modulars. But the school was growing, and the modulars were kind of a makeshift. And so the school leadership was discussing how can we get more space. Years ago, the leadership at Mount Olivet, the school started in '84, and you can check that out on the website, but Mount Olivet had built this 2-story building. They were able to build the whole building, but only finish the first floor. So we had a strategy that we could accommodate the growth if we could just finish that second floor. It made sense at the time. And so we decided that in order to do that, we would approach the leadership of the church, and so we did. And the church said, hey, great idea, we encourage you to do it, but you'll need to oversee the project and you'll need to underwrite its cost. Now, you got to understand, we were an offshoot of the church, and so we had a very friendly lease, kind of short term, but I want to tell you, below market rents, lower rents than you could find warehouse space back in the day. So we met with them and said, hey, could you give us a 10-year lease? Maybe with that, we could raise some capital, finish the second floor, including the elevator, which was a critical, expensive component. And so that was our plan, and we had met with the church leadership, and they were on board to do that. I had been serving on the board at the time, and it was my turn to be chair. And I know you've been on boards, and perhaps you've been on boards, and you know the chair is kind of a rotation type thing. It happened to be my time as chair, and I recall we didn't have a lot of money. We might have had reserves for emergencies. I'm thinking $10,000. So we had decided a capital campaign was needed. We needed to raise $300,000. Well, let me tell you, it was our plan. It was a good plan. It was a doable plan. But it wasn't God's plan. It wasn't God's plan. I'll never forget the phone call. One of the elders of the church called me, and he said, Bob, I'm sorry to report, but the church leadership thinks we need to go in a different direction. We would like Grace to, we're not going to be able to do that 10-year lease. And in fact, we kind of want to pursue these other ministry opportunities. We kind of feel led to do that. Can you and Grace find a new home in a year? So with 250 students, I'm chair. It's knocked off on my watch. I'm thinking, oh my goodness, what am I going to do? So Grace needed to find a new home, and we prayed a lot those days, folks. But we created a search team. And at the time, it was very important that we wouldn't uproot the families of Grace. So just to give you a feel for the search area, we had designated Glenwood Avenue by Crabtree Valley to Highway 54 as that zone. Let's start searching. Let's knock on doors. Let's find out what's happening to see where God would have Grace. Well, I'm here to tell you those two areas have two large things that take up a lot of land. Do you know what they are? Have you ever heard of the RDU Airport? How about this, the Umstead State Park? So we had those two obstacles challenging us, right? But we explored, get this, 92 different options. But would you know that Grace did not have one match? Our search team was meeting at a Chick-fil-A at Crossroads Plaza. How many people go through that drive-thru? Well, that's the one we were meeting at. We were doing our reports. We were looking at possible options. But I was hesitant to even mention one option that the Holy Spirit was working in my heart. Let me flash back, if you will, to 1987, right over here about 100 yards, right down by Walnut Creek. I found myself planting grass seed with a man named David Martin. That night, my goal was to get him alone to ask permission to marry his daughter, Dale, who's sitting over here. And so that night, I learned a lot, as you can imagine. He worked the fire out of me, first of all. We even worked to the headlights of his van. But that night, what I learned important was that David Martin set aside this land, 801 Buck Jones Road, and his vision, his mission, his dream was for an evangelical Christian church. It was Mr. Martin's plan. It was a good plan, not an easy plan, but a doable plan. But folks, it wasn't God's plan. So I followed the Holy Spirit and I shared this information with the search team, and we decided that we would approach the Martins to see if they could help Grace Christian School. We weren't a church. Maybe they'll help a school. Side note, we ended up having a tent prayer meeting on this campus as we were trying to determine God's will for us on this land. After that tent meeting, Mrs. Martin, my mother-in-law, she shared with the whole family that while Mr. Martin always wanted a church here, she shared she always wanted something for children. Do you see where I'm going? God's plan. So the Martins clearly modeled what leaving a legacy is like. And so it didn't happen overnight, I can promise you that. There were a lot of steps, but God guided the entire process. The Martins ultimately deeded 7.3 acres to Grace Christian School and 7.3 acres to Hope Community Church, and an agreement to work together. And so two ministries could advance with this fee simple land. So Grace finally had something that they could use to motivate a bank to maybe build something. Two of my favorite stories that showed God's favor during this process, I've entitled one, Dirt Problem. During this time as board chair, I would sometimes be invited to meet with the staff and meet with the teachers, and they were always gracious, and they would always want to know what's going on. Well, we had shared at that meeting that we might get this land, but the problem with the land is, the good news is it might be free, but the bad news is it's kind of like an inverted, upside-down ice cream cone. There was a lot of dirt. And dirt is one of those things, either you have just enough, or you have too much, or not enough. We clearly had too much. So I'm sitting there talking to these educators, people teaching our children about this dirt problem. And one teacher raised her hand and she goes, I've got an answered prayer. She goes, I can take the dirt. And I'm thinking, well, maybe she can take the dirt. And she goes, I need 2 loads in my side yard. Now, I'm not that swift. I actually had a contractor tell me how much dirt we had. He said, Bob, you have 100,000 yards of dirt. That's like 10,000 dump truck loads, the kind that say stay back 200 feet. That's how big of a dirt problem we had. Well, needless to say, I don't know if the teacher, did you ever get that dirt, by the way, if you're here? I think she did. But in any event, we put out a sign. Most people, you see them around town. You have too much dirt, you put free dirt. We put out a sign. We weren't getting any hits. No hits. I mean, this was before Craigslist, right? I mean, I'm showing my age, but you know what I'm talking. So anyway, I was having a pity party one Friday, a big pity party. I had the invitations all ready to go out in the mail, and I said, nobody's calling about this dirt. So I got in my truck and I started driving around. And I went over by NC State, and I noticed there was a lot of different activity going on, and I drove by, over by Lineberry Drive, a big pile of dirt. And I just shook my head and laughed, and I said, man, that guy's got the same problem I have. And the Holy Spirit, I'm telling you, it wasn't me. I'm not that smart, folks. The Holy Spirit stopped me. I did a U-turn because the Holy Spirit said, he might have the same amount of dirt, but maybe he has a solution. So, turned around, went back in, met the guy, told him who I was, who I'm trying to help, and all this other. And he said, Bob, you know, you do have a lot of dirt. In fact, you got a ton of dirt. That's a big problem. But there's a company in town, W.E. Garrison, and they do a lot of big projects, and they might need that kind of dirt. So I went back to my office. I left a message that Friday morning at W.E. Garrison. And I said, please call Bob from Grace Christian School about dirt. How many times have you done that? So that was my message. That afternoon, got a call from Hank. Hank, this is Hank from W. Garrison. I understand you're with Grace Christian and you got some dirt. Tell me about it. I said, well, Hank, you know, been at the school. I'm a volunteer. I really don't know what I'm doing. I'm just trying to help out. But we got some dirt. And he said, well, you know, you go to Grace Christian. I've heard about Grace Christian School. I go to this church in Garner. I think he said he went to Midway Baptist. And so we were talking about church and school and God things, right? And then he said, well, tell me about the dirt. Let's get back to the dirt. And I said, well, I have a need for somebody to haul 100,000 yards away. He said, Bob, I'm shaking right now. You're not going to believe this. He said, I was in a meeting when you called this morning. I had all my superintendents around the table. And I told them that we were bidding down the road on Highway 64 for a Hyundai dealership. And it would need 100,000 yards of dirt. And he said to his superintendents, the bidding's going to be tight, but go out and look for some dirt. So God answered that prayer, silver platter special. That's just one story. And since I'm running short on time, I might save the other story for our one-on-one. But let's get back to the legacy giving. The Martins modeled for us and modeled for many about legacy giving. And legacy giving is something that I observed in many cases around here. It's kind of fun. When somebody starts the giving, it's easy to go and say, well, they did this, could you maybe do that? And that's what happened here, folks. All grading and utility work on this campus was donated. I mean, this is a significant donation. And they were motivated. They basically said, hey, if they're willing to give the land, we're willing to do this. Then we approached our general contractor. We said, look, we'll protect your fee, but how can you save us money? And they cut their upcharge on a lot of materials. Even the lockers on the second floor were part of a legacy of a representative who basically gave up his commission, gave up the profit, just due to his proximity. So there was all sorts of legacy going on. The athletic field across the street, a widow named Mrs. J.P. Riddle from Fayetteville, she donated that land to Grace. We've never met this lady ever. We've sent her pictures of the field and thanked her, but she's never met us. So lots of things have happened. Back on CO Day, September 2003, Grace was at 801 Buck Jones Road. There was a firestorm of activity in this building. It was exciting. We had reached our CO. School had been delayed by 2 weeks just due to circumstances, but with so much help going on, it was one encouraging day. And I just felt like everybody's fingerprints was on this campus. The Grace 1101 campus, right up the street, we once identified that property for our family business at Martin Properties as a logical target land acquisition. It was a good plan. It was a doable plan. I liked the plan, but it wasn't God's plan. We had circumstances that would not allow us to close it, and Grace later was able to secure favorable financing from Crossroads Ford so that they could expand the school once again. You see the pattern here. Today, Grace stewards over 26 acres on Buck Jones Road near I-40, clearly a regional location. And Wake County has an assessed value, and even though we're exempt from paying taxes, the assessed value is just over $15 million. And to think we were once considering a plan to simply finish a second floor of our landlord's building. It's an amazing story. Isaiah 55, verse 9 states, as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts higher than your thoughts. Dale and I look forward to watching Grace thrive. It's been an exciting time to see how it's done. We have no doubt that many of you in this room, your fingerprints are going to be all over this place for years to come, and you will be deciding how to make your legacy, joining the hand of God with your fingerprints because it's His plan. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.